They didn't say they were locking me in. They said, "It's for your own safety." That's the thing about betrayal. It never comes dressed in the truth. It wears the face of love, concern, and what's best for you. I remember sitting in the passenger seat of my son's SUV as we drove toward the foothills of the Rockies. The winter light was pale, the sky full of slow-moving clouds. Ethan had both hands on the wheel, tapping lightly to some song I didn't recognize. "You'll like this place, Dad," he said, voice calm and practiced. "It's called Evergreen Pines. They've got a view of the mountains and good food, just until you get stronger." I nodded but didn't answer. I'd only taken one bad fall on the porch steps last week. My doctor called it nothing serious. A sprain, maybe. I could still drive, still cook, still make my own coffee. But somehow, between that fall and this car ride, the story had shifted. When we turned off the highway, the sign came into view. Evergreen Pines Care Residence letters, carved into polished cedar, surrounded by manicured flower beds that had long given up for winter. It looked less like a nursing home and more like a resort that had forgotten how to smile. Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of lemon disinfectant and nostalgia. A fake fireplace flickered beside an empty chessboard. Behind the front desk, a young woman with bright lipstick and a name tag that said Candace greeted us, with a smile so rehearsed it could have been stitched onto her face. "Mr. Whitman," she said, "welcome to Evergreen Pines. We've been expecting you." I frowned. "Expecting me?" Ethan stepped forward before I could speak. "My dad's here for temporary care, just while he recovers." Candace nodded briskly. "Of course. We already have the paperwork on file." I turned to Ethan. "Paperwork? You never mentioned—" He cut me off gently, almost kindly. "It's just standard admission stuff, Dad. Don't worry." Candace handed me a clipboard. "You're all set, Mr. Whitman. Your son signed the forms this morning. He holds your power of attorney." My throat went dry. "My what?" Ethan gave a little chuckle. "Relax, Dad. It's just so I can handle bills while you rest." The word rest hit me harder than it should have. Rest from what? My whole life had been work. 38 years teaching history at Glenhaven High, grading papers until midnight, saving every cent for the mountain house my late wife and I built board by board. And now my son was talking to me like I'd already been buried, just not yet in the ground. Candace's tone softened, the way people speak to someone they think might break. "Let's get you settled, Mr. Whitman. Room 114, right down the hall." I followed her through a corridor that smelled like overcooked carrots and bleach. The walls were painted a cheerful yellow, but the light was too cold to make it believable. She opened the door to a small room. One bed made with military precision, a dresser, a single armchair, and a window that looked out onto a parking lot. "Dinner's at 5, she said. "If you need anything, press the call button. Oh, and your son dropped off a few of your belongings." She pointed to a cardboard box near the closet. My clothes were folded neatly, but not all of them. My favorite flannel jacket was missing. So was my watch. And my phone. "Where's my phone?" I asked. Candace blinked. "Your son said you'd be better off without distractions for now." "Distractions?" I repeated. She gave that same pleasant smile. "You'll feel right at home soon." When she left, the silence in the room was too perfect, manufactured. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my hands, steady, strong, the same hands that once built shelves and fixed roofs. They looked foreign under the fluorescent light. Through the thin wall I heard muffled voices, someone coughing, someone laughing, a TV blaring an old game show. I wanted to knock, to say something, to remind myself that I still existed. But the words stuck in my chest. Later that evening, Ethan returned briefly. He placed a small framed photo of my late wife Claire on the windowsill. "So you don't forget to smile," he said. "I don't need a reminder," I murmured. He leaned down, kissed my cheek, the way children do when they're about to leave something behind. It's only temporary, Dad. Just until we make sure you're okay. I didn't answer. He walked out without looking back. I waited 5 minutes, then 10. The sound of his car faded into the cold distance. I stood up, walked to the window, and pressed my hand against the glass. The parking lot lights reflected my own face, an old man staring at his life through a pane of glass. That night, I didn't sleep. Every half hour, I heard footsteps in the hall, doors opening and closing, the soft wheeze of an oxygen tank rolling by. At some point, I realized I was gripping the edge of the blanket like it might keep me from disappearing. When morning came, I asked the nurse at breakfast when I could speak to someone about leaving. The administrator's only in on Thursdays, she said without looking up from her clipboard. It was Monday. I nodded, forcing a smile I didn't feel. By the time I returned to my room, the photo of Claire had caught the early Sunday. Her smile in that frame was younger than I remembered. She looked like she believed in tomorrow. I sat beside the window and whispered, "They say it's for my safety, love, but I think it's for theirs." And in that quiet, something small but solid settled in my chest. Not anger, not yet, just the slow, certain knowledge that this, whatever this was, would not be the end of my story. 3 days passed before anyone mentioned my things again. By then, I'd memorized the sound of the hallway footsteps, the squeak of the night nurse's shoes, the drag of the janitor's mop, the shuffle of someone in slippers wandering aimlessly. Evergreen Pines wasn't quiet. It was simply a collection of sounds no one listened to anymore. On Wednesday morning, a young aide named Molly appeared at my door with a clear plastic bag. "Mr. Whitman," she said, bright as sunshine, trying too hard. "Your son dropped off some of your clothes from home." Inside the bag were a few shirts, a pair of slacks, my hiking boots, and something soft folded at the bottom. I pulled it out slowly, my old flannel jacket. The one with the faded plaid pattern and frayed cuffs. I used to wear it on every early morning hike with Claire, back when we'd watch the sunrise over the Front Range with thermoses of bad coffee. I smiled faintly. "Thank you, Molly." She left, and I sat on the bed holding that jacket, running my hands over the familiar fabric. I slipped it on, just to feel something that still belonged to me. It smelled faintly of pine and old soap, but when I slipped my right hand into the inside pocket, my fingers brushed against paper thick, smooth, folded once. Curious, I pulled it out. A Powerball ticket. Dated 1 week earlier, the same day Ethan brought me here. The numbers were neatly filled in with black ink. I stared at it for a long time, feeling my pulse quicken. I hadn't bought many lottery tickets in my life. Maybe 1 or 2 a year, when the jackpot climbed high enough to make the news. But I remembered this one. I'd bought it at the gas station near Glenhaven, while refueling before the drive to meet Ethan. I'd tucked it into my pocket and forgotten all about it, until now. For a moment, I laughed softly. The absurdity of it, the irony. Locked in a nursing home, with nothing but a Powerball ticket in my jacket pocket. I slipped it back into place and buttoned the jacket closed. That night, sleep refused to come. I kept thinking about the numbers, about whether they matched. I had no way to check, no phone, no TV in the room, no computer. The thought gnawed at me. By the third night, the curiosity turned into something else. Defiance. After dinner, I approached the night nurse, a young man with earbuds half hidden under his cap. "Excuse me," I said quietly. "I think I left my insurance paperwork at home. I just need to confirm a number. May I use the staff phone for a minute?" He barely looked up from his chart. "Sure, Mr. Whitman, just make it quick." The phone sat on the counter, old-fashioned, with a sticky note of emergency numbers taped beside it. My fingers shook as I dialed the Powerball results hotline. A recorded voice read out the winning numbers from Saturday's draw. One by one, I compared them. Every single number matched. At first I thought I'd misheard. I checked again. Same result. All 6 numbers. $68 million. I put the receiver down gently, as if the sound might wake the building. My heart pounded so hard it felt like someone knocking from the inside of my chest. I walked back to my room slowly, my mind spinning. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands clasped tight together, trying to understand what this meant. I was a man with no keys, no car, no phone. A man legally signed away by his own son. But in my jacket pocket sat a ticket worth $68 million. I didn't smile right away. I just breathed, long, steady breaths, until the edges of the thought started to make sense. Then, quietly, I began to laugh. It wasn't a bitter laugh. It was the kind that comes from somewhere deep, like an old engine finally turning over after years of silence. For the first time since Ethan drove me through those gates, I didn't feel helpless. I felt awake. The next morning, during breakfast, I noticed things differently. The way Candace used her smile like armor. The way the administrator, Mr. Raines, lingered too long near the donation box. The way other residents avoided eye contact, like they'd forgotten what faces were for. I kept my jacket buttoned, the ticket pressed against my chest. Nobody could know. Not yet. Later, I went to the common room. The television was blaring a cooking show, but no one was watching. I took a seat by the window, pretending to read an old magazine. My reflection in the glass looked almost unfamiliar, a man others had decided was finished. But that reflection didn't scare me anymore. It reminded me of something I used to tell my students. History doesn't repeat itself. It waits for people to stop paying attention. Well, I was paying attention now. That night, I opened the small notebook they'd given me for cognitive engagement. Most people used it for gratitude lists or daily reflections. I used mine differently. I wrote, "They think they locked me away, but they only locked themselves out." Then I tore out the next page and wrote a list. 3 words. Lawyer, proof, plan. I didn't know how yet, but I would find someone who could help me make sense of this. Someone who didn't share my last name. When I finished writing, I slipped the notebook under my pillow and turned off the light. The hallway outside was full of quiet movement, nurses changing shifts, doors closing softly, the slow hum of fluorescent bulbs. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, one hand resting over the jacket pocket where the ticket lay. The air smelled faintly of bleach and mint tea. And for the first time since losing Claire, I felt something fierce and alive, rising in me again, not hope exactly, but something close. I whispered into the darkness, "You picked the wrong man to lock away." The words hung there in the stillness, like a vow. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. Evergreen Pines had a small courtyard behind the dining hall, a square of cracked concrete surrounded by a wooden fence, painted white so long ago the color had faded to gray. The staff called it the Wellness Garden. There were 2 benches, a fake fountain that hadn't run in months, and a few dying shrubs that leaned toward the sun as if begging for one more season. That was where I met Rachel Morgan. It started with a plan. Quiet, careful, and written in the back of my notebook between lines of harmless crossword puzzles. I'd overheard Candace talking to another nurse about how residents could use the staff phone for special appointments if approved by the administrator. I knew I couldn't ask for one outright, not with Ethan's signature on every form that defined my so-called care plan. So I lied. Could I schedule a consultation with an estate specialist? I'd asked Candace on Tuesday morning. The insurance office told me I might be eligible for a tax adjustment. She blinked, uncertain. The words, tax adjustment, were just confusing enough to sound legitimate. "I'll check with Mr. Raines," she said. An hour later, she returned. "You can make a quick call this afternoon. 5 minutes." 5 minutes was enough. That evening, using the staff phone, I called a number scribbled from the back of a discarded newspaper, an ad for Discreet Legal Solutions, Estate and Power of Attorney Review. A woman's calm voice answered. "Rachel Morgan," she said. "I'm calling for a friend," I began cautiously. "An older man. He's in a care facility." His son has control over everything. But he recently found something valuable, something that changes everything. She didn't laugh, didn't hang up, just said, "Can this friend speak freely?" "No," I said, "not on this line." There was a short pause, then, "Where is he?" "Evergreen Pines, Glenhaven." Another pause. Then her tone shifted, professional but low. "I can be there Thursday, disguised as a volunteer. Tell him to meet me in the courtyard. 2:30. She hung up before I could say thank you. I stood there for a moment, the receiver pressed to my ear, my heart hammering like I'd just gotten away with something enormous. 2 days later I waited in that courtyard. The sky was pale and sharp with spring wind. I sat on the bench, pretending to read a newspaper from 2019. At exactly 2:31, a woman in a beige cardigan and volunteer badge stepped outside, carrying a tote bag filled with what looked like donation forms. She was in her mid-40s, dark hair tied neatly back, expression calm but watchful. "Mr. Whitman?" she said softly. I nodded once. "Rachel Morgan," she said, taking a seat beside me. "You said you had something." I glanced toward the windows. No one was watching. Still, I lowered my voice. "My son placed me here under the pretense of recovery. He has my power of attorney. I never signed it willingly. And a week before that, I bought a lottery ticket. I found it in my jacket last week." Her eyes flicked up, assessing me, not judging, just measuring the weight of my words. "You verified it?" "Yes. $68 million. She exhaled slowly, the way people do when they're trying to contain surprise. "Does anyone else know?" "No one. And I want to keep it that way." She reached into her tote and pulled out a small folder. "You're right to be cautious. Once a ticket like that becomes public, it attracts everyone, especially family with legal authority. We'll need to claim it through a blind trust." "What does that mean?" "It means the name on the claim isn't yours," she explained. "It'll be filed under an alias, something that can't be traced back to you. The money will go into a secure account managed through my firm. Once it clears, we transfer ownership to a trust in your control. That way, no one, including your son, can touch it." I leaned back, letting her words sink in. "And if he finds out?" She met my gaze. "Then he'll learn that love without respect doesn't count as family in the eyes of the law." That line stayed with me long after she said it. We went over details. She'd handle the paperwork under the alias Henry Lake. I'd sign initial authorizations for identity verification. Nothing that would tie back to the name Harold Whitman. The claim would be processed through the Colorado State Lottery Commission under corporate protection. Everything would look routine, another trust acquisition, one of hundreds filed every year. I told her about Lily, my granddaughter, the only person who still called to ask about my day. "She's studying nursing in Denver. I want her protected. Half the money should go into a trust for her. She doesn't know yet, and I don't want her to, not until she's ready." Rachel smiled faintly. "You remind me of my father. He used to say, 'Don't leave them gold, leave them choices.' We can build those conditions into the trust." We spoke for nearly 20 minutes. Every so often, a nurse passed by the window. We fell silent until they were gone. Before she left, Rachel handed me a plain white envelope. "Inside are preliminary forms. Keep them somewhere safe until I contact you again. And Mr. Whitman." "Yes?" "Don't tell anyone you've spoken to me. Not staff, not family, not even the friendly ones. Especially not the friendly ones." She stood, adjusted her cardigan, and disappeared through the side gate like a ghost in daylight. I sat there a while longer, holding the envelope on my lap. The wind rustled the dead leaves around my shoes. For the first time in months, I felt the air move through me, not as something cold, but something alive. That evening, I opened the envelope under my blanket, with the bedside lamp turned low. Inside were 2 pages, a confidentiality agreement, and a temporary trust authorization under the name Henry Lake. At the bottom was a small handwritten note. Freedom is never given, it's quietly taken back. I smiled. Then I signed. When I folded the papers and slid them into my Bible, a book I hadn't touched in years, I realized something strange. For the first time since Claire died, I wasn't living someone else's version of what was best for me. I had a secret. I had a plan. And for the first time, I felt like history was finally on my side. The trick to being invisible isn't hiding. It's blending in so well that no one bothers to look twice. That's what I did for the next 10 days. I smiled at breakfast, nodded politely at nurses, joined the Thursday sing-along in the common room, and even let them take my blood pressure twice a day without a word of complaint. Inside, I was wide awake, watching, counting, listening. Evergreen Pines wasn't a home, it was a stage. The staff performed compassion, the residents performed gratitude, and behind it all, the administrators performed efficiency while skimming whatever they could from the system. It didn't take long to see it. I learned their rhythm. The morning shift arrived at 6:30 sharp. Candace always clocked in 5 minutes late, coffee in hand, lipstick red enough to distract from her tired eyes. The night nurse, the one who'd let me use the phone, often forgot to log medication doses. And every Tuesday afternoon, Administrator Rains held budget reviews in his office. I'd seen the envelopes, thick ones, passed quietly to him from delivery staff. I didn't write any of this down. Not yet. I just filed it away in my head. The first sign of Ethan's meddling came through gossip. Molly, the young aide, was changing my bedsheets one morning when she said casually, "Your son's been busy. He was here last night talking about selling your house. Said something about liquidating assets." I froze. Did he say he had permission? She shrugged. "He said he's your power of attorney, so it's all fine. Nice guy though. Brought donuts." I thanked her and waited until she left, before I let the anger breathe. It wasn't loud anger, it was the kind that settles behind your ribs like heat from a dying fire. He was selling my house. The same one I'd built with Claire, nail by nail. The same porch where she used to hang her wind chimes. That night, I took out Rachel's envelope and stared at the name on the trust, Henry Lake. That alias had become my second skin, and for once, it fit better than the one Ethan had forced on me. I knew what to do next. After dinner, I slipped quietly into the staff lounge while everyone else was glued to the TV in the common room. On the counter, beside a stack of unused forms, sat the facility's phone. I dialed Rachel's number from memory. She answered on the first ring. "Henry?" "It's Harold," I whispered. "They're selling the house." A pause, then the sound of papers rustling. "Without your signature?" "Without my knowledge." "Then it's fraud," she said. "We'll use it." "How soon?" "I'll file an injunction under your alias. But to revoke your son's power of attorney, we'll need proof that he acted against your interests. Anything you can get will help." I looked at the phone, at the faint reflection of my face in the black screen. Proof. I can do that. The next morning, I began playing what I called the quiet game. I stopped reacting to small injustices. When Candace brought me the wrong breakfast tray, I smiled. When another resident took my chair during bingo, I laughed it off. When Mr. Rains forgot my name for the third time, I corrected him softly instead of snapping. They relaxed around me, stopped watching. And that's when I started watching harder. From the library, I could see into Rains's office through the glass door. Every Tuesday, a courier delivered padded envelopes. Rains signed a clipboard, then slid the envelopes into his filing cabinet. One afternoon, I timed my hallway walk just as he stepped away for coffee. I paused by the door just long enough to glance at the label on one of the folders. State reimbursement. Private account transfer. My pulse quickened. Evergreen Pines wasn't just bleeding residents emotionally, it was stealing from them financially. That night, I wrote in my notebook, "Proof isn't always found in words. Sometimes it's in silence and timing." The next day, During the afternoon medication round, I pretended to nap while the night nurse refilled the tray cart. He left his phone unlocked on the counter, playing music. I noticed the small light blinking in the corner of the screen recording mode. He'd been secretly filming residents, probably to mock them later. I reached over, tapped the stop button, and quietly forwarded the last recording to my own email address, an old one Ethan didn't know existed. Then I deleted the sent history. The video showed a resident begging for help, while the nurse laughed in the background. It was cruel, humiliating, and it was proof. 2 nights later, Rachel called again. "The trust has cleared," she said. "You're officially Henry Lake in the state system. The claim is processed. The payout is secured." For a moment, I couldn't speak. "Half is locked under your granddaughter Lily's name, as requested," she continued. "The rest remains in a private holding account. You'll have access once we finalize your revocation of power of attorney." I finally managed to say, "Then let's finalize it." She hesitated. "Be patient. The court hearing must be airtight. One mistake, and your son will contest it. Keep acting like nothing's changed." "Trust me," I said. "I've been doing that for a lifetime." Before she hung up, she said something that made me pause. "Henry, or Harold, whatever name you go by now, don't let the money distract you. Freedom isn't a number." "I know," I said softly, "but it's a start." After the call, I walked to the window and looked out at the dark hills beyond the fence. The stars above Glenhaven were sharp and cold. In the reflection, I saw not a frail old man but someone dangerous in his quiet, someone who'd learned to weaponize patience. They thought they'd buried me in safety. They had no idea I was digging my way out. The morning Ethan came, the sky hung low and gray over the Rockies, the kind of weather that presses down on your bones. I saw his car, first, a gleaming black SUV I'd never seen before, parked right beside the staff vehicles. He always did like to stand out, even when pretending to blend in. Candace poked her head into my room. "Your son's here, Mr. Whitman. Isn't that nice?" Nice. That was one word for it. I adjusted the collar of my flannel jacket and took my time walking to the visitors' lounge. My knees ached, but it wasn't the kind of ache that made me weak. It was the kind that reminded me I was still alive. Ethan was waiting by the window, hands in his pockets, wearing one of those expensive vests that say, "I golf now." His hair was slicked back, his watch flashing every time he moved. He looked like someone who'd forgotten what humility was supposed to feel like. "Dad," he said with practiced warmth, stepping forward to hug me. I let him. His arms were stiff, perfunctory. "You look good," he added quickly, like he was reading from a script. "I look the same," I said. "How's the house?" He froze for just a second before recovering. "Still there, still big, still full of stuff we probably don't need." I watched him sit down across from me, his knee bouncing. He never could stay still when he was hiding something. He smiled. "I brought you something." He handed me a brown paper bag, the grease marks already spreading. "From your favorite diner, liver and onions. You always loved that." I didn't touch it. How thoughtful. He leaned back, feigning ease. "So, how's everything here? Staff treating you right? The food okay?" "Fine," I said. "Routine's good for me." He nodded too fast. Yeah, routine's important at your age." I let the words hang. Then I asked softly, "And what routine are you on these days, son? Renovating my house? Emptying my life out box by box?" His knee stopped bouncing. "Dad, come on, don't start that." "I'm just asking what you've been busy with," I said evenly, "since you seem to have all this new energy for home improvement." He rubbed the back of his neck, the same nervous tic he had as a teenager when he got caught lying. "We just want what's best for you, okay? Marissa thinks." "Marissa," I interrupted. "The woman who called my books clutter and tried to sell my record collection for $40? He winced. "She meant well. Look, it's not about stuff, Dad. It's about safety. The house has stairs. Narrow halls. No railing on the porch. You can't live alone anymore. I studied his face carefully. He believed his own lie, or wanted to. And yet you're fine living off the proceeds of that same unsafe house. He flinched again. What's that supposed to mean? It means, I said, lowering my voice, that I know you've been speaking to a realtor. Without my consent. His expression flickered. He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried a laugh that didn't fit his face. You've been listening to gossip. You know how these places are. People talk. I stood up slowly. You're right. People do talk. But I listen better than you think. He followed me with his eyes, uncertain. Dad, you're tired. Let's not make this harder. We're just trying to help you transition. Transition, I echoed. From homeowner to property listing? From independence to stability, he corrected. I turned to face him fully. Do you remember the summer you crashed your car into the neighbor's fence? He blinked. What? You were 16. You called me from the station, crying, because you were scared I'd be angry. Do you remember what I said? He frowned. You said, everyone makes mistakes. No, I said quietly. I said, take responsibility before someone else does it for you. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. I walked past him to the window, staring at the frost forming along the edges. You've taken everything I built, Ethan. My home, my name, my freedom. And you did it with a smile, so you could tell yourself you were doing the right thing. Dad, he said weakly, I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did, I said, turning. You hurt me with your good intentions and your signatures. He dropped his gaze to the floor. I just thought. You thought wrong, I cut in. You thought I was done. But I'm not. The silence stretched so long that I could hear the hum of the vending machine down the hall. Finally, he tried again. Look, maybe we can work something out. Sell the house, put the money somewhere safe. I already did, I said softly. He blinked. What? The money's already somewhere safe. He gave a confused laugh. What does that mean? It means, I said, stepping closer, that you should stop assuming I'm helpless, because I'm not. He stared at me for a long time, then forced a smile. You sound paranoid, Dad. Maybe, I said, but paranoia keeps old men alive. He didn't answer. He looked at the bag of liver and onions still sitting untouched on the table. You're not even going to eat? Give it to someone who still trusts you, I said. He stood slowly. Are we okay? Not yet, I replied. But we're honest now. That's a start. He hesitated in the doorway, his reflection faint in the glass. Smaller somehow than I remembered. You've changed, he said quietly. I smiled faintly. No, Ethan. I just stopped pretending. He left without another word. That night, I sat by my window, the jacket folded neatly on my lap. Outside, the wind whispered against the walls like a warning. I reached into the pocket, felt the soft edge of the lottery claim receipt. Rachel had mailed me under the name Henry Lake. I wasn't sure if I felt triumph or sorrow, maybe both. But one thing I knew for certain. My son had just seen me for the first time in years, and it scared him. They moved Arthur Mendez into room 209 the week before it happened. He was a retired accountant, quiet, polite, the kind of man who folded his napkin twice before setting it down. We'd started talking at lunch after he recognized the worn copy of The Grapes of Wrath I always carried. He'd been a numbers man all his life, and though his hands trembled now, his mind was still sharp. Ever notice, he'd said once, how people stop using your name when you're old? You become dear, or sweetheart, or sir. That's the first warning sign. Arthur had a dry humor I liked. He was one of the few residents who still read the newspaper instead of watching endless reruns. But more than that, he noticed things, details, patterns, behaviors. He told me he used to audit hospitals for misused funds. People hide the worst crimes under the prettiest paperwork, he said. That line came back to me 2 weeks later, when I saw the staff wheeling a covered stretcher down the hall before sunrise. They moved quickly, avoiding eye contact. I caught a glimpse of a hand, thin, familiar. Room 209's door stood open. "Who was it?" I asked the nurse at the desk. She didn't look up from her clipboard. "Mr. Mendez. Peaceful passing." "Peaceful," I repeated. "Heart failure," she said flatly, already reaching for the next chart. But Arthur had been fine the day before, laughing, talking about helping me file a complaint against Rains for overcharging residents on laundry fees. Something was wrong. Later that morning, I went to breakfast. The air was thicker than usual. People whispered. Molly, the aide, looked pale. "They said he just stopped breathing," she murmured. "But he wasn't on oxygen or meds. He was healthy." "Did they call his daughter?" I asked. She frowned. "He doesn't have one. Only a niece, I think. The administrator handled it." I didn't eat. I sat staring at my untouched eggs until they went cold. After lunch, I slipped into the hallway when no one was watching. Room 209 was empty, beds stripped, curtains open. On the wall, the space where Arthur's framed photo had hung was bare, a square of lighter paint left behind. They were erasing him already. That night, when the halls went quiet, I did what Arthur would have done. I followed the paper trail. The door to the records office was always locked, but I'd seen Candace punch in the code before, 4291. Her birthday. People always use their birthdays. The keypad beeped softly, and the door clicked open. Inside, the air smelled of dust and ink. File cabinets lined the walls, labeled alphabetically. I found Mendez Arthur in the third drawer. His medical file said, "Cause of death, acute myocardial event. Signed by Dr. L. Rains. Asterisk." The administrator wasn't a doctor. I turned the page. Attached to the back was a billing statement, 2 months of extended care charges applied after his death. And a line item I'd never seen before. State insurance reimbursement transfer authorized. Transfer to where? I flipped through more files. Same phrase appeared again and again, in different handwriting. Dozens of them. All residents marked as deceased within the last year. I took photos with the staff phone I'd borrowed earlier, under the pretense of checking the weather. My hands shook, but not from fear, from purpose. As I turned to leave, I heard footsteps. I slid behind the open door just as the light flicked on. Candace entered, humming softly, a paper cup of coffee in her hand. She walked straight to the cabinet, labeled "Pending Transfers," unlocked it, pulled out a manila folder, and scribbled something inside before locking it again. When she left, I slipped out, heart hammering. I didn't go back to my room right away. I went to the back garden and called Rachel from the staff phone. She answered after one ring. "Henry? It's Harold. I found something." Her voice tightened. "What kind of something?" "Records. Dozens of them. Residents marked dead after they'd already been cremated. Funds transferred from state reimbursements. Administrator Rains signed as Dr. He's, not one." There was a pause, long and heavy. "You're telling me Evergreen Pines is falsifying death records to siphon state insurance?" "Yes." "Do you have proof?" "I have pictures. Dates. Signatures." She exhaled sharply. "You need to get those to me immediately. Email, mail, anything. But don't let anyone see you. This isn't just elder fraud, it's felony-level exploitation." I looked up at the faint stars above the courtyard fence. "Arthur tried to warn me," I said quietly. "He was going to file a complaint. Now he's gone." "Then you'll finish what he started," she said. "I'll contact a friend in the Attorney General's office. But you need to stay calm. Stay invisible." "I'm good at that," I said. When I hung up, I felt the cold air bite through my jacket. I pulled it tighter, pressing the envelope in my pocket against my chest, the one with my new identity, the one that held the life they couldn't take from me. Inside, something shifted. The anger I'd been carrying wasn't just personal anymore. It wasn't about Ethan or the house. It was about every man and woman in this place who'd been silenced under the word care. I whispered into the dark, "They buried the wrong man." The next morning, the staff announced a memorial service in the dining hall. 10 minutes long, no music. Just Rains reading a generic statement about our dear friend Arthur. No mention of who he was. No one cried. But I did. Quietly. Not because he was gone, but because I finally understood what it meant to be seen too late. When the ceremony ended, I slipped a folded note into the empty flower vase on the table. One sentence. Justice is still breathing. That night, I wrote in my notebook, Arthur's death won't be erased, and neither will mine. Outside, the wind rose against the windows, and for the first time since arriving at Evergreen Pines, I wasn't afraid of the sound. It didn't sound like loneliness anymore. It sounded like a warning, and maybe, just maybe, a beginning. The courthouse in Denver wasn't grand like the ones you see on television. No marble pillars or gold-plated doors, just pale walls, tired carpets, and a smell of coffee that had been reheated one too many times. But to me it might as well have been a cathedral, because that morning I wasn't walking into a building. I was walking into freedom. Rachel met me outside the entrance, hair pulled back, glasses glinting in the cold sunlight. She looked both exhausted and unstoppable. "You ready?" she asked. "I've been ready since the day they took my keys," I said. Inside, the hearing room was small, 2 tables, one judge, a stenographer, and the heavy silence of people about to have their lives rearranged. On the left sat my son Ethan, in a pressed navy suit, his lawyer whispering beside him. He looked confident, but not comfortable. I could tell by the way his hands twisted his wedding ring. On our side of the table, Rachel spread out her files, with calm precision. "Let them underestimate us," she murmured. "It makes winning cleaner." The judge, a woman in her late 50s with sharp eyes and a voice that could cut glass, called the session to order. Case number 542C. Petition to revoke power of attorney in the matter of Harold Whitman versus Ethan Whitman. Hearing my name said out loud, like that my real name did something to me. For months, I'd been Mr. Whitman, room 114. Now, I was back to being the man who built a life, raised a son, and still remembered who he was. Rachel began. "Your Honor, the evidence will show that my client, Mr. Whitman, was placed into Evergreen Pines Care Residence under false pretenses, stripped of property control, and subjected to financial exploitation by his son, who claimed to act in his best interest." Ethan's lawyer, a sleek man with too perfect hair, leaned forward. "Objection, Your Honor. There's no proof of malicious intent. My client acted solely out of concern for his father's safety." Rachel smiled slightly, the way a teacher does when she knows the student hasn't done his homework. "We'll see about that." For the next 20 minutes, she spoke like a woman dismantling a machine. Step by step, she laid out the pattern, how Ethan filed for emergency guardianship 2 days after my fall, how he liquidated my investment account without notification, how he listed my mountain home for private sale before I'd even been admitted to Evergreen Pines. Then came the real blow. "Additionally," she said, sliding a folder across to the judge, "we present evidence of widespread financial fraud committed by the Evergreen Pines administration, which my client uncovered while under forced residency." The judge frowned. "Explain." Rachel nodded to me. "Mr. Whitman?" I stood slowly, my palms steady against the table. "Your Honor, while confined at Evergreen Pines, I discovered multiple falsified death certificates and forged billing records. Residents declared deceased while still alive, or charged for months after they'd passed. I have photographic documentation of each file, including signatures by Administrator Leonard Rains, under a falsified medical license." The judge blinked. "You're telling me this facility has been defrauding the state?" Yes, ma'am, I said. And covering it up for years. One of the victims was my friend, Arthur Mendez. He was silenced before he could report it. Rachel handed over the photos, the ledger pages, and the transfer receipts we'd printed. The courtroom fell silent, except for the sound of pages turning. Ethan's lawyer sputtered, "Your Honor, my client had no knowledge of any of this." Rachel turned sharply. "No knowledge, perhaps, but full benefit. Mr. Whitman's accounts show multiple transfers from his father's property holdings directly into joint assets shared with Evergreen Pines shell accounts. Whether he knew or not, he profited from the theft." Ethan's face went pale. "That's not true. I only—" The judge held up a hand. "Sit down, Mr. Whitman." He obeyed. For the first time in years, he looked small to me. Not because I was stronger, but because he'd built his life on a foundation of convenience instead of truth. Rachel continued, her voice steady. "We ask for immediate revocation of the existing power of attorney, full restitution of Mr. Front Whitman's financial control, and an injunction preventing any property sale pending the criminal investigation into Evergreen Pines." The judge studied us for a long moment. Then she spoke, her words sharp and final. "Petition granted. Effective immediately, the power of attorney held by Ethan Whitman is null and void. All control of property, assets, and financial decisions reverts to Mr. Harold Whitman." A hush rippled through the room. Rachel leaned toward me and whispered, "It's done." I nodded, eyes fixed on the judge, as she continued. "Furthermore, I'm forwarding this evidence to the Attorney General's office for investigation. If what I'm seeing is accurate, Evergreen Pines will be facing serious charges." When the gavel came down, it sounded like thunder. Outside the courthouse, reporters had already gathered word. The investigation had spread faster than we expected. Microphones, cameras, flashes of light. Someone shouted, "Mr. Whitman, is it true you exposed a nursing home scam worth millions?" Rachel raised her hand. "No comment at this time." I walked past them without looking up. I wasn't here for headlines. I was here for something they couldn't photograph. Ethan caught up to me on the courthouse steps. "Dad, wait!" I stopped. The sun glared off his watch. He looked tired, unshaven. Not the polished son who'd walked in earlier. "Dad, please," he said, voice cracking. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know they were doing all that. I just thought—" "You thought," I interrupted, "that you could make decisions for me, because it was easier than talking to me." He swallowed hard. "I thought I was helping." "You weren't helping," I said quietly. "You were replacing me." He blinked fast, eyes wet. "I don't want your money." I smiled sadly. "That's good, son. Because now you'll never touch it." He flinched like the words had weight. Maybe they did. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear. "You wanted to keep me safe, Ethan. Well, you succeeded. I've never been safer than I am right now, free from everyone's idea of what's best for me." For a moment, he looked like the boy I used to drive to Little League. Confused, afraid, still searching for direction. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Then learn from it," I said. "Because I'm not the lesson. I'm the warning." I turned and walked away before he could answer. Rachel waited by the car. "You handled that well," she said. "I didn't handle it," I replied. "I lived through it." As we drove away from the courthouse, Denver's skyline glimmered against the snowy peaks in the distance. I watched the city recede, thinking of Arthur, of Claire, of all the names erased from those files. Rachel's voice broke the quiet. "What will you do now?" I looked out the window at the open road, the mountains rising like sentinels ahead. "I'll start over," I said, "on my own terms." For the first time in a long time, I believed it. The cabin Rachel found for me sat beside the Cache La Poudre River, where the water moved slow and clear between banks of pine and wild grass. It wasn't large, 2 rooms, a porch, and a chimney that leaned a little to the left, but it was mine. Every board, every nail, every breath of mountain air belonged to me again. I moved in quietly. No fanfare, no announcement. Rachel handled the final paperwork, making sure the property was bought through the Henry Lake Trust. Even the mailbox bore the name Lake. That suited me fine. Let the world think I'd disappeared. Maybe, in a way, I had. The first morning I woke there, the air smelled of rain and pine needles. A blue jay tapped the window before taking off into the trees. For the first time in years, I didn't wake to the shuffle of nurses' shoes or the hollow buzz of fluorescent lights. Just silence, honest and clean. I made coffee, sat on the porch, and watched the sunlight slide down the ridges of the Rockies. My hands wrapped around the mug, steady and warm. The world felt wide again. That afternoon, a letter arrived. Plain envelope, familiar handwriting. Lily. I opened it carefully, afraid that somehow even the paper might break my heart. Dear Grandpa, Dad told me everything. About the hearing, about Evergreen Pines, about what they did. I don't know how you found the strength to go through all of that, but I'm so proud of you. I thought I'd lost you when they put you in that place, and I hated myself for not fighting harder. I want you to know I'm changing my major to Elder Care Administration. People like you shouldn't have to fight alone. Love, always. Lily. I read it twice, then a third time, until the words blurred. My granddaughter, the one person who still believed in me, had chosen her own kind of rebellion. Not revenge. Something better. I folded the letter, placed it beside the photo of Claire that I'd brought from Evergreen Pines. The glass was cracked from the move, but her smile was still the same gentle, knowing, the way it always had been when I told her one of my ridiculous plans. I did it, Claire, I whispered. I found the way out. The wind picked up just then, brushing through the pines like a soft answer. That evening, Rachel called one last time. It's official, she said. Evergreen Pines is under full investigation. State auditors confirmed everything you uncovered. The administrator's been arrested. It'll be on the news tomorrow. I closed my eyes, letting the weight of it settle. Then Arthur can rest. You've done something remarkable, she said. You didn't just free yourself, Harold. You changed something bigger than you know. When we hung up, I stayed outside until the stars came. The river shimmered in the moonlight, alive and endless. I thought about all the versions of myself I'd left behind. The teacher, the husband, the father, the man in the locked room. They were all still part of me, but none of them were in charge anymore. I picked up my notebook, the one that had started this whole fight, and wrote the final entry. Freedom isn't about running away. It's about choosing where you stand and who you stand as. They tried to lock me away in safety, but all they did was give me time to remember who I was. And once you remember your own name, no one can own you again. I closed the notebook and set it on the porch railing. The moon rose higher, silver light spilling across the river like forgiveness. In the distance, a lone wolf howled, a sound not of fear, but of existence. I smiled. I hear you, I whispered. I'm still here too. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel old. I felt free. Freedom can't be granted by others, it's reclaimed by those who remember their worth. Sometimes the world will try to lock you away in comfort, convince you that safety is obedience. But real peace begins the moment you stop living by someone else's permission and start living by your own truth.